Have you ever caught yourself changing just to be accepted by someone else? Maybe you start listening to their favorite music, dressing the way they like, or agreeing with things you don't fully believe. And this isn't because it's who you are, but because you're afraid they won't want you otherwise. So you put on that chameleon effect. So when you live with borderline personality disorder, BPD, the need for love and closeness can feel so intense that you lose sight of where you end and the other person begins. Now, this isn't just trying to fit in, it's about identity disturbance or confusion. And it's a core symptom of BPD, which is that unstable self image. And in situations like this, you almost shape shift to stay connected, hoping that if you become exactly what they want, maybe they won't leave. Does this resonate? Does this make sense to you? Because a lot of individuals with BPD or even with BPD traits experience this on a regular basis, and they have this experience, this feeling, this need to chameleon in a lot of their relationships. And a lot of times, this can be rooted in the fear of abandonment, which is another hallmark feature of borderline personality disorder. And this is when you fear that if someone truly knew you, they'd walk away, they'd abandon you, be like, oh no, I don't like that about him or her. So instead, you want to blend into their life, hoping that by being agreeable, available, and even perfect will make them stay. And a lot of times you may not even notice when this happens. One day you realize you've stopped making your own decisions. You ask yourself, what would they want me to say? What would make them happy? And it's a removal of your sense of self in order to please that individual so they won't reject you, they won't abandon you. But it actually intensifies your feeling of emptiness. And for those with BPD that are in this situation, or even if you've had this experience before, you often end up changing your opinions to match theirs. You stop seeing your friends because they don't like them, or they say something negative about them. You ignore your needs, even the basic ones, in some instances, just to keep the peace. And this isn't about weakness. Don't confuse it with that. It's about survival. For individuals with BPD, that have that core content of fear of abandonment, rejection sensitivity, and emptiness, it's about survival. You may have learned those things over time. And for someone with BPD, emotional connections feel like oxygen. So when the connection is threatened, you'll do anything to hold on to it, even if it means losing yourself, because the fear of suffocation is so intense. And this can drive you to be hypercritical of a lot of situations. There's a lot of research that shows that individuals with BPD will often skew very neutral situations as negative. This could be you're both sitting on the couch, you're watching a show, and you're both kind of into the show. But then you look over and you're like, hey, they're not giving me any attention. I bet they think such and such, such and such, such and such, they're bored with me, whatever it is. So you turn it on yourself, and that gives power to your BPD and family in the head. That's that chorus in your head that empowers BPD beliefs, behaviors, and patterns. And you end up acting on it, which creates relationship disruptions, relationship problems. So when you first get into a relationship, it feels good at first, right? To kind of lose yourself in the relationship and things like that. This is all just initially, it's that honeymoon phase, because at first closeness can feel really magical. So you're not even on the couch yet looking at your partner like, what's going on? Uh-oh, and that neutral situation. This is before that. But it can end up building to that. So that's why I brought it up. But where it all starts again, right? At first, you have that closeness and it feels magical almost. You feel full, you feel needed, wanted, even complete. All your inner emptiness is quiet for a while. BPD, family in the head, they're quiet for a while. but it's a fragile kind of closeness, right? And it depends on constant approval, on not rocking the boat. And soon, the magical feeling starts to slip away or morph into anxiety. The fear that if you stop being what they want, they'll leave. That's that abandonment component. That's now we're at the couch and you're looking over at that person like, "Hey," and all that stuff starts clicking. And what happens is that in that relationship disruption, sometimes they may leave or they could pull away. And when that happens, it doesn't just hurt, you feel shattered inside. You feel this inner sense of brokenness. That's because your identity was built around that person. You're not just grieving the relationship, you're grieving the version of yourself you became with them. You might feel lost, numb. You may have panic attacks. You may have intense anxiety at the thought of being alone. You wonder, who am I without them? But the better question is, who was I before them? Got to challenge yourself and ask yourself that. Who was I before them? And that's an important question to ask because healthy relationships aren't built on the merging of you with your partner. That's what BPD and Family in the Head wants you to believe, that you are going to morph into this other individual that is healthy, happy, having this magical time, and everything's perfect, and you never argue, and the relationship is great, and you hold hands when you want to hold hands, you have sex when you want to have sex, and you do all this stuff, and everything's just perfect. That's not a real relationship. That's a false relationship, but that can become this invisible standard. So in order to have healthy relationships, you have to, in many ways, reclaim yourself. You have to be that self component. They have to be themselves. And you end up with a combined third person that is the relationship, not the losing of each other to blend unhealthily. I think that's a pretty good word. Unhealthily into one. That's not what we want. And in order for you to heal that, heal yourself, build that sense of self, you have to engage in small acts of what are called self-honesty. I want you to think about what you enjoy, even if nobody else does, stuff that you like to do. Also, what do you need when you feel sad, bored, or lonely that isn't external? What do you need to feel better, to push off that sense of sadness, boredom, or loneliness? And what would you do today if you weren't trying to impress anyone? What would you do? What would give you that sense of satisfaction? What would give you that sense of fulfillment? What do you want to do just for you? And as you start to rebuild your identity, not by rejecting connection, but by learning how to stay connected to yourself while you're still loving others. And it's possible to do that. BPD and Family in the Head want you to tell you you can't. And that's the fallacy. Don't buy into that. You've got to resist that. You don't have to become someone else to be loved. And that can be an intensive statement, and I understand that. You got to be patient with yourself too. Really, you want to temper these massive standards that BPD and Family in the Head tell you that you have to have. What we want you to do is recognize, again, that you don't have to become someone else in order to be loved. The people who are meant for you to connect with, not your performance, not your sense of self-sacrifice, not your silence or your ability to chameleon in that relationship. You're allowed to take up space in your relationships. You're allowed to have your own preferences, your own voice, and your own life. Absolutely. And you are worthy of love when you show up as yourself. Now, that can be a hard thing to get to. And if you can't do it yourself, there's a lot of workbooks out there. I got a few things that might help you. But also finding a mental health provider, finding some resource that you can do this to build your sense of self, understanding yourself. That's so important. And what I want you to do, if you've ever felt like you disappeared in a relationship, I want you to leave something in the comments. Share your story in the comments because a lot of people read the comments. And I think we've created a really good kind of a go-to community, I like to think of it as, where people can feel like they're not so alone dealing with BPD and their issues and beliefs, behaviors, and patterns associated with it, because you're not. You're not alone in this process. But building up your sense of self will help you so much, and it can be so good to know who you are, what you enjoy, and believe in it. It is important to recognize who you are in that relationship and that you don't have to lose yourself in order to be loved. I hope this was helpful for you, and I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.